I've been an active campaigner and community activist since about 1974. Living in Tottenham since 1980. Been involved with a lot of different groups and activities which encourage people to support each other and also to try and make the world a better place for everyone. The key groups regarding the Undercover Policing Inquiry that I was involved with was London Greenpeace and the McLibel campaign that came out of London Greenpeace. London Greenpeace was the first Greenpeace group set up in Europe in 1971 and was an active campaigning group around environmental issues. And in the 1980s, decided to launch a campaign focused on McDonald's as an example of what all corporations are doing and their negative effects on our lives and on the environment. We were sued by McDonald's, and as a result, we set up what we called the McLibel support campaign. The case became the longest trial in English legal history and ended up with damning rulings, a range of damning rulings against McDonald's. So in that respect, it was a great success. In fact, the leaflets which they tried to suppress ended up being distributed in millions all over the world in dozens of languages. So I believe no corporation sued campaigners like us in this country ever again since then. So we were unaware that, in fact, the police had infiltrated London Greenpeace and the McLibel campaign from the mid-80s to the mid-90s. So for about 10 years, 3 different police officers, all of whom had relationships, so-called relationships with women connected to the group. Instead of targeting corporations that are damaging people's lives and exploiting and oppressing people, animals and the environment, they were actually targeting people who are trying to expose and create alternatives to such corporations. So it's pretty disgusting, not just the tactics that they use, but also the fact that we could have been targeted in that way. And they got heavily involved in the group. One of them became the treasurer of London Greenpeace. A different officer became helped to actually write the original anti-McDonald's fact sheet that was the subject of the libel action by McDonald's. So they weren't just casual members of the group, but they were heavily involved. This infiltration was pretty disgusting, and in not just the fact of it, but also the tactics that they used, the sickening sexual abuse of a number of women from which they might never fully recover, the massive invasion of privacy of dozens of people over a 10-year period. As we know from the newspaper hacking of people's telephones some years ago, which was a huge scandal, this was 1,000 times more serious than that controversial those previous court cases. This was life hacking over a 10-year period, especially the relationships with women. Also attempts to influence some of the campaigning that these groups were involved with. So it had a big impact, particularly on individuals. As for myself, I was a single parent throughout the 90s, and one of the police officers had helped to babysit my young son from time to time, and I think that's pretty disgusting when you think about it. The aim is really to expose the truth about what happened and how outrageous the setting up of such secret police units, political policing against campaigners and groups that want to try to improve society. In fact, 83 of the core participants have signed a general statement in which they've made their views clear about all aspects of undercover policing and the inquiry, and we're very unhappy with the inquiry, and we feel that's been manipulated by the police into a cover-up, so we want. There's some recommendations that we organised our own People's Inquiry in July 2018, fed up with waiting for this inquiry to kind of kick off. And I'll just read out some of the key recommendations that we agreed then, which was full disclosure of the names of the spies, the organisations, the 1,000 organisations they targeted, and the files they compiled on activists. And all of that kind of information has been in very short supply up to now. A finding of institutional sexism, racism, and an anti-working class, anti-democratic agenda in the police in terms of who they've been targeting, and a requirement to address such bias effectively. And finally, undercover political policing of protest and campaigning groups should cease, and all such existing units should be disbanded. It's interesting that the government currently is trying to rush a bill through Parliament in which they're trying to allow in future undercover policing of all kinds to commit all kinds of crimes in the pursuance of their work, and it seems that the government is obviously very worried about the bad publicity that the spy cops units have generated because of the campaigners' efforts and this inquiry, and they're trying to undermine and sabotage the inquiry. The key thing is to expose the truth, continue to expose the truth. It was us who fought for the inquiry and got it, and maybe most importantly, to support movements for positive social change. Continue to support these movements that were being targeted and undermined. In fact, at a time of social and environmental crises in this country and across the world, such movements are the key to a better future. So everybody should support and indeed get involved in such movements.